Hey everyone, good evening. Welcome to the Harmonic Atheist. Thank you so much for being here. And the Unraveler is already here. Nice to see you, Alan Bondar. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go. Excited about this one. Everyone, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm going to bring our guest on in just 1 minute. I just want to remind everybody of a couple quick things. Number one, if you're interested in doing an interview, please do reach out to me either by Facebook. My handle is Harmonic Tim, or by email, harmonicatheist@yahoo.com. It's also in the description of this video. So if you want to do a video, please, reach out. We'd love to get you on the schedule. If you have escaped Christianity, your story means a lot. And who knows, it may be someone else's survival manual. In addition, I am now doing 101 peer counseling, peer support. Strike that. Not doing peer counseling. I'm not a counselor, not a therapist, peer support. But if you are interested at all in joining with me for that support, feel free to reach out as well. I do want to be available for people that want to talk one-on-one about their deconversion and want to just have someone to bounce ideas off of privately. Maybe you don't have anyone to talk to about it. Maybe you are in a spot where you're just like, you know what? I feel like I can't go public. I don't even want to, just talk to anybody, but I just want someone kind of anonymous to talk to. Whatever it is, if there's some part of your deconversion that you need some lay, just, non-clinical peer-to-peer support, I'm here for you. Please reach out and we'll get it set up. In addition, I'm doing a lot of live streams where people call in and do like the audio and or video. Please keep an eye on that. I'd love to have you, if you see a topic that strikes your fancy, please jump in. We'd love to have you on camera for 5 minutes and just share your heart on a certain topic. We're doing that a lot, and it's a big deal. I would say the community that's doing that is growing. And of course, a lot of people check in later if they're busy and they watch the replay. But that's a really, really big deal to me. And I appreciate the support. So many people have been jumping into that. We got some great topics. I feel like we kind of really kicked it into high gear with Andrew Jasker the other day, talking about shadow work during his interview. And we've talked sort of around the topic of shadow work a number of times since. We're going to keep talking about it for quite a while. But anyway, thank you all so much for being a part of my community. And I'm going to bring in our guest tonight. Tonight, we've got Elliott Christopherson. Elliot, thank you so much for joining us.
Greetings and salutations, fellow brothers in Christ.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here. Just a quick bio, and then we'll get started. Elliot is from a lot of places, including South Dakota, but he currently lives in Kansas. And he was a Christian fundamentalist, as was I, for 35 years. He was raised as a believer. He attended Bible college. And then later, he had what seemed to be a life-changing experience with Jesus before eventually having some doubts that led him out of Christianity and ultimately to atheism. After leaving the faith, he wrote a book called How to Stop Being a Christian, which is, I love the titles you guys come up with. You and Alan come up with the coolest titles. How to Kill God the Easy Way and How to Stop Being a Christian. But again, your book is the second one. The link, if you want to pick that book up, is beneath this video, so please check it out on Amazon. In addition, Elliot co-hosts the YouTube channel called The Deconversionists with Alan Bondar, who is in the chat tonight. And they discuss a lot of problems with Christianity and help other people sort of think through counter-apologetics as well as philosophical issues with Christianity, as well as just their stories. So I appreciate you being here tonight. Elliot, before we jump in, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and something fun, hobby or something like that?
A fun hobby. Well, my job is my hobby because it's not full-time. So I work for the post office.
Okay.
So with all the exasperations and hatred that comes with that. So that's my hobby. I'm in a really, really small town, about 200 people in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, like the middle of the farmland.
Wow.
So I manage like one zip code's worth of mail for this micro office. So yeah, it's more of a hobby. Uh, anyway, I really appreciate you having me on. You're
Yeah.
obviously a much busier man than I am. My schedule is pretty flexible. So
I appreciate being here. Well, in terms of just if you could think us before we jump into your story, tell us something really quirky. Tell us your favorite drink at Starbucks or something a game you play with your kids at home. Something really quirky.
Well, I don't have any kids, so I'm not gonna be able to cover that one. But
Okay.
as far as a favorite drink, favorite drink at Starbucks. Man, I'm pretty boring. Just sociopathic black coffee.
Oh, well.
When I can find a Starbucks, because out here it's probably an hour away. Well, it is an hour away, not probably. So they're a bit rare.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Yeah, I've stopped going there years ago just because I was able to make my own coffee. Eventually figured out how they did it and made it as close as I could to the the flavor I liked. But anyway, we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, well, you have to burn your beans. That's the secret
Yeah,
for of consistency at Starbucks is slightly burned, and then it all tastes the same no matter what Starbucks you go to.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, we're so glad you're here. If you could, I'd love to ask if you could take us back into your story and tell us like what was it like growing up in your family? What were you taught as a kid in terms of Christianity and religion in general? I'll jump in with some questions, but we just love to hear how it all started.
Yeah, so like probably 99% of the Christians out there, I was born into the religion. It's kind of like being raised believing in Santa Claus, except in Christianity, in a Christian home, like no one ever tells you around the age of 9 or 10 that Jesus is not real. The belief is protected, and like that's pretty much where you're going to be almost for life for most people. So as far as my personal situation growing up, my parents moved out to California in the 1970s, and like everything out there in that time period, there was a lot of cults to fall into, and they had grown up Nazarenes, and somehow they got roped into this fundamentalist cult. At least I would call it that. They would not, of course, because
Hmm.
everyone who's in a cult doesn't think they're in a cult, but it was of a Baptist slant, very dispensationalist, if people know what that means. And so I was raised into that. We went to church, 3 times on a Sunday. We got to have Sunday school and normal church service, and then you go back in the evening, and you basically spend your entire day thinking about God or sitting in a pew or singing songs.
Yep.
And I was involved in the youth groups. I'm sure a lot of people will recognize the name Awana. I was in that for, well, all the way up to high school. But at a certain point, we moved to the Great Plains to South Dakota when I was around 10. And at that point, I was homeschooled. So we used a curriculum from Florida called ABECA, and it's associated with or produced by Pensacola Christian College down there in Florida. I'm sure
Mm.
a lot of people will recognize that if they were homeschooled.
I'm painfully aware.
So,
Yeah.
oh, were you victimized by that too?
Yeah, I was the same thing. Awana all the way. And one of those crowns, one of that crown filled with jewels. And yeah,
Oh
Abeka.
yeah.
I went to Bob Jones for my part of my college, but I didn't like, actually go to Pensacola. But yeah, we had Abeka during homeschooling time, and yeah, it's just I'm hearing alarm bells all over in your story.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not trying to trigger people, but like that's the nature of these stories. Is
Yeah.
a lot of baggage, just so much baggage. You might as well bring a trailer or U-Haul to fit it all.
Yep.
So you're homeschooled too?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was homeschooled, and it wasn't probably as intense as some experiences in the sense of the ultra fundamentalist, ultra sheltered. My mom was a little bit more hands off. I was accelerating past some of my peers in a sense. She was like, "Look, you're not being challenged. Let's challenge you, and challenge yourself." So I kind of honestly, I have homeschooled myself. I don't mean that in an arrogant sense. I just kind of did. She's like,
Hmm.
here's your books. Go have at it," and I did. So it was
Right.
a good experience for me to move ahead, but yeah, Becca, I mean, God's woven and everything, 2 plus 2 equals 4. And let's talk about Jesus for a second before we do the next one. It's like everything's about God.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. It equals God because God is the
Right.
author of mathematics and logic in the universe, apparently. So yeah,
Exactly.
everything does equal God. Let's see. So I was homeschooled till 11th grade, then I was thrown back in. Well, maybe I should back up a little bit, talk about my childhood, I guess. So most of us are familiar with James Dobson. May he rest in pieces. And I was disciplined, raised, whatever, on his curriculum. My parents really bought into that. I actually recently bought his original book called The Strong-Willed Child because I wanted to last year when he died because I wanted to go through it and try to see if they had gotten some of these concepts from the book. I mean, obviously they did, but I was looking for something in particular. So this will sound crazy to a lot of people, but I was actually waterboarded as a child
Wow.
as an attempt at discipline. One of my earliest memories is about 3 years old, being dragged into the bathroom, clawing at the doorway because my parents were going to try something they called water spankings, because apparently the stick wasn't working well enough that day. And so they as a 3 or 4 year old, like stood me up in the shower and just forced my head up and like dumped cold water over my face, to try to, I don't know, break the strong-willed child, in the words of the great James Dobson.
If I could just speak for
Um,
the audience for a second, holy shit, that's insane.
yes, holy shit, yes. Um, and then, of course, I got gaslit later as an adult that, hey, that never happened. Well, I feel the effects of that to this day. Like, I'll have a anxiety attack if cold water hits my face, so that takes care of swimming for me. So I know it happened. That's just a fact. But they apparently abandoned that pretty early on and just relied on the stick. Um, it was my mother primarily. I think I was beaten with every possible object she get her hands on. Broke the wooden spoons. Took mini blind wands off of the window coverings. If you're familiar with what I mean, those really long,
Yeah.
skinny sticks. Broke everyone in the house on me and my sister.
Can I ask you a question
Um,
about the discipline real quick?
yeah.
When you look at the discipline, for some people that did that to us, and I wasn't quite as bad as that, but I was in that vicinity of things that happened to me. Would you say that it seemed more like they were just angry adults who used God as justification, or was it purely like just this was all religious? They just had to kind of beat Satan out of you.
Well, I'm not really sure. I kind of would give it a 50-50, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, to consistently spank a child with that level of intensity, you have to be angry. I don't think that someone who would have a naturally calm personality, who is very forgiving, would go that far that regularly.
Yeah,
But
that's
it
true.
was absolutely religious based. This was the way that you were supposed to discipline a child. And if you go back to the Old Testament, of course, Proverbs says, the rod of correction shall drive, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from them. I have that verse memorized because it was used so often to justify it. But also in the Mosaic Law, a strong-willed child who was too rebellious and the parents could not deal with him was to be taken outside the city by the parents and stoned to death. Now, I personally don't think that really happened. I think that was more of a retroactive creation of the Mosaic Law later on. So I would give it that benefit of the doubt that I don't think a lot of parents were actually taking their children out and stoning them because they're disobedient. But like that was something that was mentioned, um, time to time in my childhood that, hey, you're disobedient child like yourself back in Old Testament times would be stoned. So,
Yep.
we're actually doing you a favor.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
It really does seem like
now,
for a lot of us that the connection too is if you don't learn to bow your knee to your human parents, you will bow your knee one way or the other to your heavenly parent, and he's going to discipline you a lot worse than I could ever do. Meaning,
right.
either severe discipline in life or hell itself in the afterlife. And you get that sense that like they're kind of trying to justify their abuse by saying, technically, I'm sparing you from a much, much more horrific outcome if you can, sort of judge yourself. If we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged, like the verse says. Judge yourself and bow your knee to me as as your earthly parent. You will spare yourself so much heartache later. And that parallel I was presented to me a lot, but I also see it in a lot of Christian parents now who are willing to go just to the nth degree and do all kinds of stuff to their kids. It's really crazy. But
Mhm.
I know we read some of the, or pop some comments up here, but I'll just say real quick, just I think Shannon's a good example. I'm so sorry you were put through that violence. I mean, that's horrifying. It really is. And by the way, I'll put up some comments throughout this. I won't put them all up at the moment if we're in a topic, but I'll pop them up sometimes. And if anyone has a question, definitely pop in the comments. I'll ask it as soon as I can. But I'm just I'm so sorry for and one more comment here. Frankie says I was sexually abused by my father as a child, but I forgave him. I'm just so sorry. The level of abuse that occurs in some of these Christian families, and that they justify somehow. It's off the charts. But anyway, feel
Right,
free to take us back.
right. And I don't want to paint Christianity as a whole with too broad of a brush, because this is obviously going to be very individual, and there are quite a few Christian parents that do not go that far. And I wouldn't want to put a lot of the blame on myself as like a strong-willed child. I mean, yeah, I suppose maybe more often than not I was a disobedient child, right? I didn't have it coming, if you will. It's just that some parents do get really frustrated and don't know what else to do, and if they are indoctrinated into this is the way, they're not going to have an alternative. So I can forgive like up to that point, but it's not, I mean, it's not really forgivable, but it is at the same time. It's kind of a paradox where you just deal with it.
Yeah, well, it seems like at this point too, there's so much child psychology out there, and just human development stuff that's like I can and there's so many like pushes for gentle parenting this and whatever, some kind of parenting that's different than that. I feel like at this point there's a lot less excuse for it. I mean, it's like
Yeah, definitely.
but there are Christians that just put their fingers in their ears and still say that's all secular psychology.
Right.
We will beat sin out of you. We will beat the devil because there's really hell to pay if we don't. So
Right. And I grew up in a family and an extended family that didn't believe in psychology whatsoever. They thought it was satanic, or from the devil, or it was just made up, or et cetera. They didn't think it was a real field of study and could have any real impact, in the real world. They would never have ever thought of going to counseling or a therapist or a psychologist. That would be like the last possible thing they would do. Kind
yep,
of like someone who believes in alternative medicine wouldn't go to the doctor. They would go to somebody else. So this is essentially their version of alternative medicine, except in the realm of child discipline. So
exactly.
yeah, suffice to say, I didn't have a very good time, and I I also feel bad about even talking about it, because I am kind of, I wouldn't say betraying my family or betraying my parents, but it feels that way. So when I talk about my childhood to anybody, especially here in such a public setting, I my conscience bothers me. Like it hurts to throw them under the bus. That's just more of the baggage that I got to carry with me everywhere. Is I can't even talk openly about it without feeling bad.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of what we went through is with the Christian worldview is that sense of like you got to keep the secrets quiet. And I've heard so many stories like that, whether it's in families or the churches, like for the sake of the peace and the sake of the testimony, you have to keep this on the lowdown, and just don't do anything that defames the name of Christ. And it's very sad that we still carry that. I remember I've told this story a couple times in my channel, but I had that exact issue with my dad, where my dad was really heavily abusive to all of his kids and to my mom. And I privately went to the elders of my church, not all of them, just like 3 of them that I trusted the most. And I just said, I'm just dying inside. Can you please help me? Just this is crazy what's going on in my house. And and he's like a Christian school teacher and all this stuff. He's passed now. He passed back in 2019, but he's a Christian school teacher. He's preaching in church sometimes, and he's abusive off the charts. And my dad found out that I went to those elders within days. He's like, "Get out of my house. I wish you were never born." And I mean, it
Wow.
was like insane. So I know that sense of like they protect their reputation, and if you spoil it, it's nasty time. And there's a point of forgiveness. There's a point to saying I'm not trying to hold this over you forever, but there's a point of saying, look, you gotta fess up. You did some bad things. I mean, when I left Christianity, I told my kids right away, like, look, I used to spank you guys, and I didn't do like crazy spank. I just did like normal, simple spanking. I was like, guys, I was wrong. And I've said it publicly on this channel many times. I was dead wrong to spank you ever, and it will never happen again. Once I realized thought autonomy matters, I realized body autonomy matters too. I can't do this and justify it. This is abuse, and I stopped. You have to confess it and make it right. And ironically, these people that are their whole religion is about confess it and repent and make it right. They can't confess and repent and make it right. It's insane. But anyway,
Right, for sure. And I do want to head off something before I go any further. Is since I've left Christianity, I get a lot of these responses from Christians when I tell my story, and the first thing they try to do is they try to find plot holes in my story to find out where I went wrong and try to blame it on me, or blame it on something that is not about the actual truth of their religion. And when I start by telling my story and talk about the severe discipline, like I can imagine a Christian saying, well, there's the root of your problem is, you're holding all this stuff against the religion when it's not the religion's fault. You have baggage that you haven't dealt with um in relation to your parents and how you were raised, so that's why you fell away from the faith. Absolutely untrue. That is absolutely not what happened. Like, just because you have a hurtful experience happen to you is not enough to make you walk away from something that's true and potentially unrelated to your personal issues or what's happened to you. You know, I left Christianity because Christianity is not true. I didn't leave because I was overly disciplined as a child. So the everybody tries to pick apart your story, or we'll get into that probably later. But I just want to head that off. Like, this is not
Yeah.
why I left Christianity. It's not
Well,
because of my childhood.
could I just respond to that real quick too? And I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but you know, I'm just going to speak freely and with colorful language. They're, in my opinion, they're absolutely fucking nuts to think that that's not the issue. Your God says, "I will drown almost every child in every person in the whole universe except for these 10 people and Noah's family, and I will kill all the firstborn of Egypt. And you know what? Because you guys complain in the desert, I'm going to bring snakes in to bite you." He says, if you guys don't obey me right, I'm going to literally take you in front of your enemies and lift up your skirts and show everybody your nakedness. I mean,
Mhm.
he is a whack job psycho god, and that's who they call their hero. So if parents aren't acting like that, if they're not acting a bit psychotic and abusive, they're basically not following through with their own God. Their own God is so insane. And the fact that most Christians can't see past it is really, crazy. But I almost feel like when I see a parent that's like, "Oh, I'm not going to spank," like, "I believe in Jesus, but I'm not going to spank." I almost feel like that's a form of deconstruction. Like,
Yeah.
you're kind of ignoring some passages in the Bible, but you're also ignoring the fact that our God is a consuming fire. Whatever you sow, you will reap. God cannot be mocked. And whatever, when you're sinning, sin deserves punishment. Those equations are all over the Bible. And so the Christians that are like, "No, I want to be more gentle parenting." I'm like, "You're deconstructing. Keep going. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that you can
Right.
look at Yahweh and say, 'No, I'm not doing it Yahweh's way.'"
Right. And if being strong with discipline as a Christian is being consistent, and I can understand, like, I've probably heard this before. I can't remember a specific case, but like, it makes sense that a parent would say, if it keeps you out of the eternal lake of fire, I will beat the shit out of you all day, every day, because it's worth it. Like, at least there's a measure of consistency there, and it proves that they actually believe what they claim to believe. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can see it making sense.
It's almost
I
like
can
a
see a
tough,
parent
tough,
say,
tough level on steroids.
right, right. Because if it does keep somebody out of an eternal lake of fire, and they do believe that that is a possibility and that does exist, like, why wouldn't you do anything to stop your child from going there? That would be a quote unquote loving act. So I get it that there's a theological basis for this.
Yeah. Can
But
I
if
ask?
there's not, and you're wrong, and your religion is false, then you are a moral monster by doing it, because there
Yeah.
is no reason to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Can I ask, amidst all some of the dark things we've started with here, just in terms of your relationship with God, at what point did you get it presented to you that this is simple gospel? You're a sinner. You need a savior. Jesus provided the way. And at what point did you make any kind of confession of that or profession of that?
Well, that's a really good question, because as a child, it's really difficult to nail down exactly when that happened. I was raised with that from the very beginning, so I probably heard the gospel the first time at, I don't know, as soon as I could comprehend words. I do remember having some kind of comprehension of it around age 5. Um, telling my parents, oh, I believe in Jesus now. I mean, but can you really, at 5 years old, can you really understand any of this? Not really. I remember another point at probably 8 or 9 when I did go through the salvation process, and did even pray it in private, the salvation prayer, and yeah, it made me feel good for an hour as an 8-year old, sure, but I mean, can you really say that that was the time? I mean, you do these if you're a Christian, you probably have done that similar act or similar thought process, many times. And most of them as a teenager will rededicate their life to Jesus or do that again as an adult. You go through these phases. So I can't really nail that down.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
no, nobody really can.
Yeah, so many of us did exactly that. We just kept there's just so much at stake. You have to be sure that you're really in on the, that you've got your get out of jail free card. Did you feel
Yeah.
though, like at any point that you would have said that you, looking back, had an experience of like a relationship with God where you would say, you know what, by the way, I see some comments. I'll read them in a second. Everybody else go down a few more lines real quick, and then we'll jump back to your comments. But, where you'd say, I really did have a relationship with God. I really did feel like when I prayed, he was present. I felt him answering, or at least, his will was guiding me. Was there anything like that from a young age that you felt in terms of the realness, even not in church where everyone's watching, but just you and God alone?
Right. I can't really put my finger on it. No, that it happened much later in adulthood. Um,
Okay, so
that
but it did happen
yeah,
then.
oh, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll definitely get to that. Yeah, I
Okay,
had the life changing experience with Jesus for like 110%. Yeah,
wow. Well,
later
maybe
on. Yeah.
if you could be thinking about where you want to take us next, I'm just going to read a couple comments here so we don't lose them in the mix. To me, it's mind-boggling how many parents or pastors get away with this type of behavior. I do believe in forgiveness, but I keep seeing the same behavior in my father's life. Yeah, Brandon, I'm sorry. It's awful. It's awful. I really hope that there's some path forward to restore that, and that he can wake up from what he's doing. My mother admitted physical punishment was wrong and has apologized. That's awesome. It wasn't religious related. It was the times 60s and 70s when that was thought the way to raise kids. Yeah, a lot of it. It's funny. Sometimes I'll watch like Andy Griffith. I grew up on Andy Griffith, and you'll there's at least one episode, if not two, where he's like Opie, little Opie was disobedient, the character, and he's like, I got to take you out back behind the police station and give you a
Right.
whooping. That's just what you did. You got a whooping for being disobedient.
Yeah. I'm glad that your mother apologized to you. Um, my mother is about 74 right now. I'm 42. My mother has never apologized, and she never will. And the physical abuse that I got paled in comparison to the verbal abuse, which was far worse and lasted far longer.
Hmm.
Um, I probably dealt with extreme daily, hourly verbal abuse from my mother, probably for 10 to 15 additional years after my last spanking, at 15. So
Can I ask, was
yeah,
that
it's
related to religious stuff, like you're a wicked sinner, or just
oh yeah,
general abuse?
oh 100, well, both, but 100%. Much of it was religious related. I was told many times that I was going to hell and I was irredeemable. I remember my parents were kind of Calvinist. Um,
That explains a lot.
although they probably wouldn't necessarily admit it, because it kind of depends on the day. A lot of Christians kind of like to split the difference between free will and Calvinism, or Arminianism and Calvinism. But I remember overhearing my mother one night, when she was in bed with my father discussing their children, and she told him, I don't think my children are elect. I think they're going to hell. And like, that really bothered me, because she's basically admitting that they're pieces of shit and I can't save them. And this was like at 18 for myself. But yeah,
Wow,
all the time
that's
I was told that.
so I'm jumping ahead here, but just to put it simply, I say this tongue in cheek, and I don't mean to make light of it, but the idea of dealing with healing from religious trauma is very, very close to your experience and your heart. And I imagine you have some incredible insights that we'll probably get to some of them tonight about how to deal with all this. But man, I'm so sorry for what you went through. That sounds truly, truly disturbingly awful.
Yeah, we all have our own path out of Christianity, and our own path to dealing with the religious trauma. The way that I cope and deal with it, other than the fact that I'm an extremely hardened person at this point, at 42. Been through a lot. The way I deal with it is to do what I'm doing right now, fighting Christianity and trying to reason with Christians, and hopefully being a little part of the catalyst that might bring one or two out of the religion. That's
Yeah.
my coping mechanism. I guess I haven't gotten out of that angry atheist phase quite yet.
Well, I wouldn't leave it too quickly. It probably is a good thing. There's a lot to
Yeah,
legitimately be angry about.
for sure.
What happened next in your story?
Okay, so I was homeschooled with the Christian curriculum until 11th grade. At 11th, I was put into a Christian private school because I needed my high school diploma, and we got to get it somehow. And if you're homeschooled, it's going to be a real challenge to get that unless you transfer to a real school that's going to grant you that. Um, there was a it was a difficult, to say the least, transition from being homeschooled all those years to then suddenly being in a classroom environment. I barely got through it, barely functioned in that classroom setting. um but got through it in the end, got the diploma, and didn't know what I was going to do after high school. And it was kind of a an emergency measure. At the end of the summer, I shipped out to a place called Jackson Hole Bible College. I'm sure there's a few people watching that might know what that place is. If you're familiar with Eric Hovind and Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, they all were or are associated with the Jackson Hole Bible College. So this was 2003 or 2002 is when I began my time there. I think I was a year ahead of Eric Hovind. I think he graduated there about a year before I did, so I didn't get the
Mm.
displeasure of meeting or interacting with him. But yeah, we share that as a alma mater.
I'm
I
just
believe
jealous you got to
he,
go to Jackson Hole. It's on my bucket
yeah,
list to get there.
well,
It's a beautiful place.
if you're not a skier, or you don't do much outdoors, the experience will be wasted on you, which it kind of was on me. I was just there to, you know, get through my time in Bible
Right.
college. Uh, Jackson Hole Bible College, in my opinion, was a pretty extreme version of Christianity. I would also label it a cult. Um, well, I'd label most religion a cult. So, I mean, what's the definition of a cult? Well,
Yep.
that college is it's a very small community, and it's governed or by this dictator who runs the place, is the president of it. He's the head instructor, and he also is the pastor of the local church. So it's basically a closed community. A lot of kids like me would go there to get a foundation um, in that theology, and learn how to like defend their faith. It's kind of a finishing process of the indoctrination before they would go to a secular college. And the idea was, go here first before you go to college, and that way your chances of falling away when you get into the real world um, are much less. So
Yeah.
it was definitely an indoctrination mill, I would call it. Um, None of
Yeah.
my credits from Jackson Hole Bible College transferred to my actual degree at a secular university, so that
Surprise,
was
surprise.
frustrating. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the experience of feeling like it was just there to sort of nail that coffin shut that Christianity is true beyond a shadow of a doubt. I went to Bob Jones for a year and then a smaller school in Pennsylvania called Lancaster Bible College, but it just that's what it was all about. I mean, the second one was a lot more liberal comparatively, but they're basically there to say like, look, there's not much question left. There's nothing really much to investigate. We all know it's true, but we'll give you some extra tools in your toolbox to deal with the doubters and how to evangelize better. But there was never like ever a sense of like really dealing with the honest questions about where
right.
this thing came from, how the canon got formed, what church history has done, who's had authority and power over changing the narrative and the interpretation of it all. Just you look back and you think you all acted like there was so little to really talk about. I mean, there was all these classes, but it was just a rehash of what they'd already done to us in church, just a lot more information,
Exactly.
but no real, like, it's like everybody's dancing around the real issue and no one's willing to actually
Exactly.
attack it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the problem is that they can't attack the real issues, because if they do, they're going to cause doubt. So the best that they can do is indoctrinate you into the theology, because that's what Bible college is. It's we're here to discuss the theology, not where the theology came from. Because if we talk about where it came from, it's going to be like taking a comparative religion course at a secular university, and it's going to destroy the faith of these, 18-year-olds. It's just not going to work. And so that was my experience there. Is it was all theology. Now, I've gone back. Jackson Hole posts their stream now online on their YouTube channel, and you can actually watch their classes live. They've done it for a number of years now, and I've actually gone back and watched a good bit of them to try to like put myself back in my own shoes back then, kind of like taking a time machine. And for example, I specifically watched their course on apologetics to try to see like how are they going to defend the faith, how are they going to address the serious problems of Christianity. And I found that they don't actually do it. They fall back on a presuppositional apologetic, and that is their only argument. It's that God is the foundation of logic and morality, and without God, you don't have it. Therefore, nothing anyone else says matters, because if they're not Christians, they don't have a foundation to know anything. Like that is the sum total of their apologetics course. And they start the course off by saying specifically that this is not going to save anyone. Everyone knows the truth. We're just here to give you this survey of other philosophies so that you're familiar with them and aware of them. But this is not where the rubber meets the road. Where the rubber meets the road is a Romans 1. Everyone knows the truth. Everyone knows God exists. And God is the foundation of everything. And like that's the sum total of how they defend the faith. And it's such a disappointment, because it just does not do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And if it did do what it needs to do, it wouldn't work anyway.
Now, in your timeline, where were you in this compared to when you got really serious about God?
So obviously, when I went to Jackson Hole, I was 19 years old. I didn't have this powerful conversion experience until I was 33.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
quite a bit longer. Yeah, there was a large gap there.
So did you feel
I'm
like
trying.
you were a Christian who had a relationship with God during Bible college?
I did. I always thought I was a Christian. As far as a relationship with God, that's kind of hard to articulate. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? How does that feel? I never felt that I had a relationship with God um, up until I had the experience at 33. Um, I would pray a lot. I would read the Bible. I would try. I would just I would go through the motions. But to actually feel like you're in a relationship with God, I mean, that's not really, not really.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I felt like, in a sense, for me, I was in a relationship with God, but at the same time, I really always struggled with this sense of why I didn't feel it as much. Like those verses about the joy of the Lord is your strength. I was like, well, if that's true, then why don't I feel more joy? And if there's peace that passes all understanding, and if his yoke is easy and his burden is light, why does it feel so heavy? And why are we
Right.
all struggling so much with sin? I mean, especially, guys with their lust, but even just like, I remember seeing my I lived with my grandmom for a while because she had a big old house and it was closer to the Bible college. She would just, she's a Christian her whole life, listened to Christian radio every day. She's one of the most cantankerous people I've ever met. Like, why do I not see the gospel changing lives? Supposedly, it's this roaring lion that will just go out there and do amazing things. But when you get down to people's nitty gritty lives, they don't look very changed and transformed. And I would struggle with that in my life. Like, I think I feel it, but at the same time, I feel very much like I'm struggling so much. Like, is this really the victorious Christian life? And
Right.
it felt so much to me like something's missing. And of course I had never ever entertained the idea that the reason something's missing is because there's a God missing. But I always felt like, as you do, you gaslight yourself. This is something in my heart. I'm sinning. I'm not committed enough. And so, you just go on that hamster wheel forever. But it's weird how it works. You're like, I have a relationship with God, but I don't feel it, but I know that it's real, so it is real, and it's crazy.
Mm, right.
Mm.
For sure.
So what happened between your Bible college years and those years before you got really serious?
Well, I became a backslidden Christian for all those years, which would have encompassed the entirety of my 20s. So I came back from college, went to a secular college, started working, and I dropped out of church, and I just lived my life. But that entire time, it's important to state that I never considered myself to not be a Christian. I never considered the possibility that there was no God. I always believed that that was the truth. I just told myself the entire time, someday I'll get back with God. Someday I'll get right with God. And I just kind of ignored it, for all that time.
Yeah.
Um,
As long as you got the fire insurance, as long as you know you can die in a car
yeah,
car and go to heaven, you can
you
slide
know,
through
I,
those times.
I wasn't really sure that I had the fire insurance. Like I struggled with assurance and eternal security, all that during that time, thinking, well, not knowing, not really having assurance of salvation, but telling myself that I was still a Christian. I just wasn't a practicing Christian necessarily. Um,
Hmm. Must have
anyway,
been hard to think through that one because that's I struggled a lot over the years, but I never had a doubt. I don't think a day of my life. So, I knew from age 5 on, I'm a child of the King and I'm secure. I never. I mean, I rededicated my life to be sure as a teenager. But I was like, I don't think I need to do this. I'm just fingers crossed here, making sure. But from that point on, for sure, I was like, I am a child of the King, and I never doubted it once. It must have been hard to feel like you were kind of on that tightrope wire.
yeah, I think that's where a lot of what I would call average Christians end up. Um, if they don't go to church and they're not in that community and they're not forced to pretend or struggle with having that relationship with God. I think a lot of them, still believe that they're Christians. They just, they backslidden, and yeah, they just live their lives and just ignore the whole thing, like I did. I, but I guess I'll just skip right to where my conversion experience began.
Yeah, I'm eager to
So
hear how the experience with Jesus part.
yeah, it was early 2016. I had lost my job and I was at a really low point. I was struggling with depression for like really dark depression for several years up to that point. And I had this confluence of personal circumstances kind of come together and meet me in that dark time where I thought that it was God trying to like get a hold of me finally, finding me in that hole, and trying to show me a better path out, a better life course. And I don't want to like get too deep into the personal details because it's kind of private, but and I think a lot of Christians are that way when you really push them hard on what exactly did God do in your life, to get you there. A lot of people are drug addicts and they like to talk about that, but like I kind of want to keep some of that stuff private. Um,
Sure.
but suffice to say that I felt God was moving in my life and was really like pounding down that door. And I was on a road trip for my birthday when I turned 33, and I had some people contact me out of my past and reconnect with me, and I felt that like God's doing something here. You know, I don't know where I'm going with my life here. I'm unemployed. Like I'm running out of money. Like, what am I going to do? And I got down on my knees and I asked God for a sign of some sort. I'm like, is this you that's doing this? And I had this feeling of like certainty, this peace and tranquility. It's kind of like Mormons get the confirmation that the Book of Mormon is true, they read the Book of Mormon and then they pray and ask God to show them the truth of it, and they have the burning in the bosom
Right.
experience. At least they claim they do. That's kind of what happened to me. Is I just felt the power of what I thought was the Holy Spirit just coming upon me and saying, "Hey, I'm showing you the right path. I'm showing you an alternative to how you've been living, and all you have to do is just give in. Just let the walls down. Just do it." And I just went to pieces, like, over this experience. I cried and I cried and I just begged Jesus to come into my heart for the first time, like really meaning it, um, more than I ever had up to that point. And it felt to me like I was getting saved for the very first time.
Mm.
And I promised God, I'm gonna turn away from my sin. I'm gonna change my life. I repented just so hard with everything that I had. And I'm like, I am gonna just let you show me the way. And I started reading my Bible again. It had been a long time since I started reading my Bible. I started going back to church. And um I felt that God was going to not only change my life, but he was going to completely change my environment, take me out of where I was, to lead me to a new state and a new city and give me a whole new life. And so I went on this walk of faith. And I moved from Rapid City, South Dakota. This is all happened within about a 2 week period. I moved from Rapid City, South Dakota to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I took a job with the state as a correctional officer in one of their maximum security prisons. And during this whole process, it felt to me like it was a miracle. It felt to me like it was God opening every door, one after another. It was, the transition was so smooth and so dramatic and so fast that I felt this had to be a supernatural experience. Everything that I prayed for came true. Um, I thought it was a miracle that I found an apartment so fast. I thought it was a miracle that I had passed all the testing for the job. I went down to Lincoln to take uh, the medical examination, and um, the doctor found that I had, like, hypertension. My blood pressure was 150 over, like, 110. And I
Wow.
thought to myself, there's no way that they're going to give me this job when I've got this condition. And so I prayed during the entire time that you know God would work this out, and He did. Um, they never said anything about it. Like, they just rubber stamped the physical examination. I'm like, wow, this has to be God.
Mm.
My first week down there, I find a church. My family had always gone to something called GARB, General Association of Regular Baptist Churches. So I looked that up on Google, went straight to the closest one, walked in the front door, introduced myself to the pastor, started going to church there. I poured my heart out to the pastor. I said, this is me coming to God for the first time. I'm starting over. I want to live on faith. I want you to help me do it. So I started a relationship with him. He began counseling me 2 hours a week, just having a one-on-one, like a therapist, leading me through the scriptures, showing me what I needed to do, how I needed to pray, giving reading assignments in the Bible. I found this at the prison. I found a Gideon's New Testament, and if you work in corrections, you'll know that you can't take anything with you behind the walls at all, no personal items. But this was the exception. Was a religious material, and so I took that New Testament and I read entire books of the Bible every night on my shift. I read it and read it and read it until it just didn't even make sense anymore. I was reading it so much,
Mm.
over consuming it. Then I went to my pastor and I said, I have never been baptized. This was in, like, the first month. And I begged him to do a special service just for me so that I could be baptized, because I was so deeply invested and committed to this that I desperately wanted to make a public profession of faith and get baptized. Now, I knew that at least according to my theology that I was raised in, that baptism isn't required for salvation. But I know that a lot of Baptists do believe that. So it's kind of a split within that denomination. And I thought I was going to hedge my bets. Like, I'm not 100% sure what the truth is on this issue, but I have to do this just to make sure.
I'm
So I
sure to
got
a Baptist pastor that was music to his ears.
Oh, of course. Well, you know, I and I'll get to my initial doubts in a second here because they started pretty very fast into this experience. But I
Hmm.
got up in front of the church. Now I'm a very introverted person. I deal with a lot of social anxiety, and so this was a really big thing for me to do. It was very difficult. But I got up in front of the church and I gave the pastor said, I understand if you don't want to say anything, we can just do it without you giving your testimony. I said, no, this is very important for me to give my testimony. I have to do this, even though it's very difficult. And so I believe that God, spoke through me and gave me the words. And I told the congregation that the person standing here today talking to you, the old version of me from a few months ago would hate this new version of me. But I have changed so much that this is the new me. And I gave the testimony about how I gave my life to Jesus. I repented and this was, yeah, it was kind of
A
like
new,
a,
new creation.
exactly. And so I got baptized for the first time in my life. And that had been something that had bothered me throughout my life up to that point, that I had never gotten baptized. It was kind of like, are you really saved? Did you really prove it? So I proved it.
Hmm.
And that started my year of living on faith. I've had a lot of Christians tell me that, well, you only gave it a year, so you must have not been committed. Well, that year that I gave it was more intense and more faith filled than any other Christian in their normal life that I've met. So duration and intensity are different. I gave it probably 10 years worth of intensity, even though it was just 1 year.
Hmm.
But that started me on my faith journey. And so for that year, I was the most committed Christian that I knew. I would go out and I would witness to people in public. Everybody I met, I would try in some way to work my testimony into the conversation. Complete strangers.
Yep.
And in
It should have,
retrospect,
that's your job.
exactly,
You
exactly,
got to be a soul winner.
exactly. And I wasn't able to witness on the job because I was in a prison. I'm dealing with convicts, inmates, and it's completely off limits to have those kind of conversations. So what I would do instead is I would pick an inmate and I would just beg God to save them. I would pray for them for days on end, just almost nonstop. Like Lord, I want to witness a miracle, and I'm in a place where only miracles can happen, and I want you to save this guy. Just if you just do it for me, just do it to prove to me that you're here and you're real, and that you can. I know you can do anything. This is the nastiest guy that on this cell block, and I want you to save him. Imagine what that could result in if you saved the roughest character on the cell block. How that could create like a cascade effect of what he could do, with his fellow inmates. We had a religious building on the campus there, and I remember going inside for the first time and seeing the thousands of religious books that they had, and it was all Christian oriented, like, pretty much every one of them, because we're in the Bible Belt. And that really affected me, that we're basically in the middle of hell, yet the truth is right here, and so much of it that these guys at any time can get what they really need here in this really dark place. And I wish that I could have been involved in the ministry there, but as a correctional officer, obviously you're prevented from doing that of any sort. But anyway, my first doubts that really bothered me And I want to preface this with all the doubts that I had during that time didn't come even close to touching my faith. They were simply observations and things that bothered me, but it wasn't something that ever would have forced me to question whether this is all true or not.
Hmm.
But one of my first doubts is when I looked around my church and I saw all these people with these frozen smiles on their faces who were not living on faith, were not committed, were not even close to being as committed as I was. And it really bothered me. It's like we have the truth. We have the gospel. We have this power to change lives. And no one else here is, except for the pastor, is acting like it. Like, what is the problem here? And I went to my pastor one day and I said, do you think it's possible to have a false belief in the truth? And of course, he said yes, because as a pastor, he's going to see these people as well, and it's going to frustrate him that they're not as committed. But there was something wrong there. And like I go to prayer meeting on Wednesdays, and we'd sit around and we would go through all these prayer requests. And to me, it sounded like we were making lists of demands to God. Like, oh, I'm having trouble with an aching back, or some other medical issue, or I'm having trouble finding a job. All of these things were going wrong in these people's lives, and instead of them just giving it to God and letting Him fix it or do His will, they were bringing a list of demands. It's like, God, please do this, please do that, please fix this, please fix that. And I'm like, this is not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be just trusting God 100%. And if God wants to give me an aching back or take away my job, that's up to Him. We're here to remain steadfast in the faith and suffer if we have to. So that really bothered me. Um,
Did you feel like as you were looking at the other people, did you feel like you were feeling like they might not be saved at all? Is that what it was, or just that they weren't really on fire for God? Because I always thought to myself, not as much the question of is all these people saved, but it bothered me that like you mentioned, you were so zealous for sharing the gospel. I always thought if you really believe in hell, and everyone around me pretty much did, I knew if you really believe in hell, then how in the world can you not spend all your time warning them? And even the Bible even says, if you know that there's judgment coming and you don't warn them, then you're culpable for that. You didn't warn them ahead of time, and their blood is sort of on your hands. You could have told them, and you could have been like Jonah going to Nineveh and saying, "You need to repent." But instead, you're like the earlier Jonah, where you're walking, going away and not doing your job. And it always bothered me. Like, do you specifically, like, there was people in my family that would watch football on weekends for 8, 10, 12 hours total. They just game after game after game. And I just, as a young kid, I thought 10, 12 hours of football, what could you have done for God during that time? And of course that said, now look at it as like, it was very arrogant and very judgmental. But at the time I was like, if you believe, is your Christianity about getting a white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog? Or is it about bringing people to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ? And what got me really inspired was John MacArthur. He had a guy on his staff named Steve Camp, and Steve Camp would write. He was a musician. He'd write songs and lead worship, but he would basically write music about this exact issue we're talking about, where he would say, you're living in Laodicea, and God's going to spew you out of His mouth. And I want to run a mission a yard from the gates of hell. I don't want a cushy life. I want to be wasted for Christ. And that inspired me so much, and it bothered me, like, Isaiah 6, like, who will go from us? And I'm like, here am I, Lord, send me. And everyone else is like, no, thank you. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Do you not want to turn this world upside down? Do you not appreciate the fact that your Savior sent His Son to die for you, and He gave everything just for you? And if you were the only human, He would have done it just for you. He loved you that much. Do you not want to let the world know how amazing this is? They can go too. And everyone's like, there's a football game on. I'm like, what are you talking about? And it really bothered me. It really bothered me. So I definitely relate to what you're saying. It's bothered me far too much, really.
exactly. And it makes me question whether or not Christians actually believe what they claim to believe.
Yeah.
And that's an argument that I've been working on recently. I think I have a lot of evidence to support that there are no true Christians. Like
Yeah.
the only true Christian is an ex-Christian because they actually believed it enough to care if it was true or not. But yeah, I wondered how many were actually saved, and I wondered how it was kind of a 50-50. Like, yeah, some of them might not be saved, but they're definitely nobody's really living their faith. At least not like I am, like really on fire for God. And obviously, I think most pastors recognize that because the evidence is in their sermons. Can you get through a Sunday sermon without getting the gospel? Like it's always or most of the time, it's an altar call of some sort at the end where the pastor gives the gospel again and invites anybody to accept Jesus. If there's anybody out there in the congregation that hasn't accepted Jesus, and like, why wouldn't they do that if they didn't see this too? Like, they obviously see that most of their congregations just lukewarm Christians. Let's see, where was I going with that?
If I could
But
just, while you're thinking where you're going, just one quick comment about that. It's amazing you said the word altar call. It reminded me, when I was at Bob Jones, we had to go to the Bob Jones church in the morning on Sundays and all throughout the week, of course, for chapel and vespers and stuff. But on Sunday nights, we could pick an approved church. And I remember this was like a deconstruction thing in my mind. The pastor, who was Baptist church, free will all the way, he's preaching of all things through Romans 8, 9, and 10, talking about election. And he literally does an altar call for the congregation where he says, this is not an altar call for salvation, but he said, some of you are unwilling to take the word of God at face value. He said, when it says whosoever will may come, I'm going to preach it like it stands. And when I see a verse that says God picks who he wants to pick, I'm going to preach it like it stands. And he's like, some of you are willing to bow your knee to one of these verses, but not the other. We bow our knees to all of God's word. And he literally had an altar call to say, will you bow your knees to the fact that the Bible does teach election? But it's, looking back on it, it was a part of my, the splinter in your mind to say, wait a second, you've got a congregation of people here for 20, 30 years who've been loving the word of God, and they're repenting finally of the fact that they're picking and choosing and cherry picking what they like. That's a problem. Like, where was God this whole time convicting them? And anyway, I'll never forget that night. It was just crazy to see people literally in tears, not to get saved, but to repent of their unwillingness to accept Romans 9,
right, right. Romans 9 for a Christian is a scary chapter. And I read Romans 9 during that time period, and it really bothered me because it specifically states that some vessels are created just for destruction. And that, I don't know how a Christian can read that and think to themselves, well, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm just created for destruction. Maybe I can't be saved. And that's why I have doubts, or that's why I struggle with assurance or eternal security. And that's one of the really acidic, nasty things about this religion, is that you're going to have doubts, because how could you not? This is a fanciful, wild story that any rational person who hears it as an adult who hadn't been indoctrinated into it would never believe this nonsense. So you're always going to have those doubts. And for a lot of these people, doubting is a sin, and there's a non-0% that think that doubting is an unpardonable sin, because how can you doubt if you're in a personal relationship with God? So they read Romans 9, and it just really fucks with their heads, and it messed with mine as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I pushed through it, like through this whole process. I just kept pushing through it. At one point, I went online because I wanted to connect with more Christians. And that was probably as a Christian, that was probably my first mistake, because I thought, well, I'm going to go to the largest forum on the internet, which is Reddit. And I'm going to go, just type into the search bar Christian. And, this is going to help me connect with some people. Well, it did the opposite. What it brought me to was Christians and atheists having debates. And for the first time in my life, I was hearing these problems with Christianity and problems with the Bible that I had never heard before. You know,
Wow.
I took apologetics in Awana. I took apologetics in Bible college. I took it in high school. We had an apologetics course, and you get all these competing worldviews, but like they never touch on the real problems. Like, I'm sure you've heard that stupid C.S. Lewis, either Jesus is a lunatic or a liar or he's Lord, the three L's. Yet we never hear the fourth one. The fourth one is legend. which is obviously the most probable. I had never heard legend before, but I was hearing it then online, and people were debating like the authorship of the Gospels, and I'm like, what is going on here? I have never heard this before. People are claiming that the Gospel of John was written in the second century. Like, what the fuck is this? And they had really good arguments. And so this bothered me to the point where I went to my pastor and I said, I have been seeing this stuff and I need answers to this because this is really concerning. And he went to seminary. He knew better. He knew what the truth was because they teach them this stuff. They teach them what these secular consensus is. Like, they know what the dates are on these books, and they know that they're anonymous because not a single author of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John actually signed their name. Like, they know the truth, yet they come back to their churches and they would rather die than preach a sermon on those problems. And so I bring this to him, and what does he do? He tells me, "Oh, well, there's answers to that." And then he reaches up on the bookshelf and he pulls down Josh McDowell's huge tome, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and he hands it to me. He says, "I think you'll find the answers in here." Well, I took
Hmm.
one look at it. I'm like, I already read this back in like high school or in my early 20s. Like, I'm familiar with Josh McDowell's work. Like, these problems, as far as I remember, are not addressed in here. And he's like, "Well, just read it, just read it." But I'm going to give you some more scripture to read. I think you need to read the book of Philemon tonight when you go to work. And I'm like, dude, you have given me all these reading assignments of more scripture. I'm like, I don't need the scripture. I need the counters to these arguments against the scripture because I'm not going to find the answer in the Bible. So I didn't read Evidence That Demanded a Verdict again. I just put it to the side. I put all the doubts to the side and just powered through it because obviously this is a test from God and I have to pass it. And I viewed everything as a test from God. Like, if this is a problem or if God's not answering a prayer, then I just have to power through it. So I just kept powering through it. So I would say about 9 months into this year, my answers to prayer started to cease. I was no longer seeing them like I did when this all started. And at one point, I had written down. I still have the list somewhere in my notes, but I had written down a list at the beginning of that year of all the different things, all the different answers to prayer that God had granted me in a miraculous way that could not have been coincidence, like one after the other after the other. But then, a number of months later, it's time to write a new list, and I don't have any answers to prayer. Like, none of these things are happening. Like, all the inmates that I prayed for, not one of them got saved. In fact, they got worse. We had a riot at the prison where two people were murdered, and we had to lock down the entire cell blocks
Hmm.
for the rest of my time there. Things just kept getting worse. So I found myself in a point where I desperately needed answers. Like, I had to have something to keep going. So I decided to call my dad. Now, my dad was a lifelong theologian. He had spent his practically his life's work studying the Bible and studying this theology, like as deep as you can possibly get inside the story. Which, I'll make that argument a little bit later here about being inside the story versus outside the story. But I called him and I said, "Not once have I ever asked you for help, but I'm asking you for help now. I'm desperately asking you for help. I need answers. You have studied this your entire life. Can you tell me now why God is not like coming through for me? He's not showing me that he's still there. He's not making this, path forward clear. I'm getting nothing right now. I need your help." I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have a very good relationship with my father necessarily, but that was my breaking point. And I was in tears. I was bawling on the phone to him, like, you've got to give me something. Like, please tell me, what is the solution here? What does it take to get an answer from God? And he told me, this is probably one of the few times when he was honest. Well, he's only been honest about his religion with me twice, and this was the first time. He said, I go out on the road every week because he had a job that was a traveling job. And he's like, I sit in my motel room some nights with my Bible, and I just think to myself, what does it take to get an answer from God? Does God have to be begged? Like, what do I have to do? Like, he told me, I don't know what it takes to get an answer from God. I don't know. I can't help you. It's a dead end. And that really, really affected me because this is the first time in my life I'm really, really going to him and asking him for help. And after all those decades of study, he had no answers for me. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And
That's
so
crazy.
I kind of pushed the doubts to the side again and kept powering through it. And I spent exactly 1 year down in Nebraska. It was June 17 to June 17. And towards the end of the year, I was really homesick and I just wanted this experience to end. But I was still committed to God and still living on faith. And so I did one more thing that was an act of faith. I had a coworker who was out on medical leave, and he had a family, and he was broke, and he was begging coworkers for help. And I thought, okay, maybe this is why I'm here. Maybe this is why God has brought me all the way down here. I thought that many times throughout the year, looking for the reason why I'm here. I thought, well, maybe I'm here just to be a light to this guy for God. And so I had saved up quite a bit of money that year because I didn't have any expenses really. And so I told this guy, I said, I'm gonna help you. And I gave him thousands of dollars, gave him about half of everything I'd saved up, and just gave it to him. And I took him out for lunch when I gave him the money, and I gave him my testimony and gave him the gospel, and I basically just pleaded with him to come to Jesus. And it's one of those situations where they're politely listening and they tell you, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian too," even though they're kind of a backslidden Christian. And in the aftermath of that, he messages me again, like less than a month later, and says, "Hey man, can you help me out again? Like I've spent all the money." And I was like, "What?" I was doing this like massive charitable act, and it just like fell apart. It didn't work, and it was like another answer to prayer that didn't come through. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I kept going. So I applied for a job back home in Rapid City, another job in corrections, and I just relied on God for it. And I went through the same process I had the year before, and I just put all my faith, put just went all in on the poker table, like this is it. And I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And the process was similar. Had to do a physical, had to do written testing, verbal, written the interview, the whole 9 yards. And I went back home and I went through the process, and one after the other, I passed it and passed it and passed it. I had been sitting around in prison for a year, and I hadn't been doing any physical activity or exercise, but I passed the physical part of it with flying colors. It was amazing. Like, this has to be God again. I passed the written test. I aced the verbal, the interview, and I got the job offer. I'm like, wow, God is giving me the ticket home. He is having mercy on me and allowing me to go home. And this is the path to get there. And I just got down on my knees and I thanked God with all my heart. And then I got the email the next day that revoked the job offer. And
Mm.
I'm like, why would God do this to me? Why would he pull a bait and switch? Why would he lead me all the way down this road and then yank it away? After I'm just putting my whole heart into this, like, God, you show me the way, and he just yanks it away. Like, I don't know what to do. Everything that I have tried to do in the name of God had failed. So I still went home, um, but I went home unemployed. And when I went home, I moved in back in with my parents in the meantime to try to get my life back on track. And I just sat there. I'm like, I'm done praying. I prayed one more prayer. And I said, God, if you are here and you really care about me, you have to show me that you're still here and you still care. I am going to wait on you. I'm going to do nothing and wait on a sign of some kind, just anything and anything for you to show me that you're still here and you still care about me. And I waited for a full year. Of course, in the meantime, I did some other stuff. I moved to down here to Kansas. I got married. Started my life over again in another state. But for that whole year, I just didn't pray anymore, and I didn't read my Bible anymore. And I was waiting on God. I'm like, if God's still there and he still cares, he's going to show me in some way. He's going to show me. Now, I would have taken anything as a sign. I would have taken a whisper in my ear. I would have taken a phone call out of the blue from somebody from my past that I knew, like reconnecting with me. I would have taken a running into somebody in the grocery store and then them telling me that they're a Christian and sharing their experience with me, or giving me a way to share the gospel with them. I would have taken anything as a sign. I was just waiting on God, just putting it out there, and I got absolutely nothing. And this finally made me doubt to the point where I was questioning whether it was real. Finally. And the the turning point came one night when I'd only been married for a few months, and I thought to myself, you know, my wife is the sweetest, kindest person that I know. And if she had had the bad luck and misfortune to have been born in a different culture, to a different family that wasn't Christian, and she had become a Buddhist or a Muslim or any other type of religion, or nothing at all, it wouldn't matter to God at all who she is as a person, how sweet or kind she is. He would throw her in the eternal lake of fire for not getting the message. And I thought to myself, this cannot be right. It can't be right. Something is really, really wrong here. And I have to know what it is. And I thought to myself, it's possible that hell is not real, but is a test to, see. Well, that's part of my moral argument. I won't go there yet, but I thought this is such a terrible thing, such an extreme thing. This eternal lake of fire, like there has to be more to this. Is this God just testing people in some way? So,
Can I ask real quick, your wife was a Christian though, or is a Christian?
she was a Christian. She doesn't know what she is now, but like at the time she was. Yeah, I mean, we were going to church.
But I mean,
Um,
I guess what I meant, getting to is, were these conversations concerning, or did you have a situation where you could kind of freely discourse back and forth and throw ideas around?
Well, I haven't really brought up any of these concerns to her yet. We were just kind of on autopilot. We'd go to church
Right.
every Sunday, and we wouldn't really talk about it much. These were private thoughts that I had at the time, because it was when I was just starting my journey out of Christianity. So I wasn't
Right.
being extremely forthcoming about it. And kind of going through an existential crisis, I guess, and you don't really want to put that on somebody else
Yeah,
um,
sure.
too
Especially,
much.
especially if you don't know where you're really going to land.
Exactly. So the the hardest thing I think that I've ever done in my life was a very simple thing, and it was allowing for the possibility that I could be wrong. So as a Christian, you can't do that. If you allow for the possibility, just the possibility that the story might be false, like you're already in hell. And I came to a point where I had to be like super honest with myself. I'm like, something's not adding up here. I have to look into this. But to look into this, I have to at least allow for the possibility that I could be wrong about everything. And the first thing I did is I just went to Google and I typed in arguments for and against the existence of God. And it takes you to a Wikipedia that details the arguments for and against. And I just read through them, read through the for and read through the against. And this was stuff I had never heard before. And like all of the arguments against the existence of God made far more sense and carried far more water and had fewer plot holes than the arguments for the existence of God. So I spent the next 3 months doing absolutely nothing but researching this problem because I figured, if the Bible is true, then it can be proven to be true in the real world, and if it's false, then and it makes real world claims, then you absolutely can test it and determine if it's true or false. So that was my premise going into this, and I treated this like a day job. It was practically 8 hours a day. Like I did nothing but just research this stuff. I watched,
Mm.
countless lectures on the internet about the Bible and about Christianity and about creationism versus evolution. And this went on for quite a while to the point where I was watching. But probably the last straw for me was when I watched this lecture on YouTube from Bart Ehrman. I'm sure most people are familiar with Bart Ehrman. And the lecture was called Misquoting Jesus, which is the title of his first book. And it was about an hour and a half long. And I listened to the whole lecture. And when he finished, I just sat there staring at my computer screen. And I just said to myself, I can't morally call myself a Christian anymore. Like this is it. I'm pretty much out. And that last straw was the reliability of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if that's what we base our faith on, are these gospel narratives, yet these gospel narratives can't be confirmed extra biblically, and they're anonymous, and they're written in the third person, and they're written in Koine Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic, we don't have a foundation for our faith. We just don't. And from there,
Mm.
it just spiraled out into so many problems, so many plot holes, so many issues with the Bible. I made a list at one point of 20 category problems, like not problems specifically, but like categories of problems with Christianity, that in
Right.
order for the Bible to be true, like every one of these categories of problems would have to be answered in such a way that there was no question. And I ended that time of study with like pages and pages of notes, to the point where I'm like, what am I going to do with this now? So I decided, well, I guess I'll do the natural thing, is I'll write a book, because I got to go
I love it.
somewhere with this information. I got to have an outlet. And I guess I should kind of rewind a little bit. When I lost my faith and became an ex-Christian, like it was the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to me. Like I was absolutely terrified when I realized that there was no God, for the first time, because it hit me like a ton of bricks that nothing is in control of the universe, nothing is in control of the world, and nothing is in control of my life. Like anything can happen. I am all of a sudden in a completely uncontrolled environment. God's not looking out for me. He doesn't have a happy ending here waiting for me. And this is what we get. Like what we see is what we get. We are in an uncontrolled environment, and it's a terrifying thing. And I fell into a pretty dark depression over this, when I left Christianity. It took me a while to get out of it. Probably a year, I'd say, before I really got the courage to tell myself that, you've been through a lot, and nothing can really hurt you from this point on. Like we can start over, and there isn't anything that can happen that's going to surprise you or that's really going to hurt you. You have vaccinated yourself against chaos. and because I kind of got sucked into the abyss for a while, like really dark place, and like that's what
Hmm.
got me out of it was realizing that nothing can hurt you now. And so I wrote the book. I finished it in at the very beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And I wrote the book for basically for two people. Like I had no imaginations of marketing it or mass marketing it or getting the public to read it. It was just it was a passion project for myself. But I wanted my friends and family to know like why I left Christianity. So it was it's my reasons. It's my path out. And I felt like if I can articulate my path out of Christianity and I can give that to other people, then perhaps someone could follow me out. So I wrote it for my father, and I wrote it for my best friend, who was a very committed Christian, another Baptist, and he had been with me as a support system throughout this um, entire time. And I wrote it for them because I really wanted them to read it and understand that I'm leaving Christianity for good reasons, or for what I just wanted them to accept the fact that I'm leaving for what I believe are good reasons. Like I was genuinely a believer before, and I'm genuinely not now, and this is why. I just want you to accept that. And my dad didn't read it, and my best friend didn't read it. They gave it to somebody else when I gave them copies of it, and I'm like, why wouldn't somebody care if they really believe? Why wouldn't they care? I mean, if I had a son and they wrote a book, or if my father written a book, like I absolutely would read it. No one read it. I've sent it to quite a few Christians that I've known, and I gotten zero feedback from any of them. I'm like, why? What is going on here? Something's really wrong. So when I first left Christianity and had all these reasons, I mistakenly, like, I made a lot of mistakes dealing with Christians after, like, we all do, because I think we all, coming out of the religion, believe that we've discovered something really important, and all we have to do is tell other people, and they'll see the light as well. It's a very naive perspective, but you don't know any better when you first start on that ex-Christian journey. And so the first thing I did is I went back home and, told my family I basically rediscovered the wheel. You're not going to believe it. I found all these things about the Bible and about the Gospels, and like I was excited. And I got a brick wall. I got all these defense mechanisms. I got um, dismissed, mocked. I got anger. I got all this shit on back at me when I'm coming to them in good faith with information to share. And I could not believe it. It really fucked with my head. And
Hmm.
it made me extremely angry. And then I became the angry atheist. Like I wasn't the angry atheist before, but after my first few encounters with Christians after becoming an atheist, then I became an angry atheist. And it's hard for me to put myself back in my old shoes and like chill out, look at it from their perspective. How would you have reacted if somebody had come to you with the same information? You would have reacted the same way. Like I understand that, but it's really hard to keep that in mind when you're discussing these issues with Christians, because like you're getting a lot of hate, you're getting a lot of pushback, and they
Yeah.
just do not want to engage on any level. It's a threat to their identity, and you're a threat to their identity because you are an example of what can happen to someone if you know you go too far with the doubts. And it's been uh
Hmm.
it's been about 8 years, seven or 8 years at this point. I've had countless conversations with Christians after coming out, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about the human mind, um, to the point where I'm actually writing a new book right now called "Inside the Mind of a Christian," and
I love it.
it's not going to be very nice. Let's put it like that. Like maybe it will hold up a mirror to them and the way that they think and the way that they engage, and maybe they'll see themselves in that, and they might want to do better. Um, I
Hmm.
get 4 or 5 like automatic responses when I tell people my story. The first one is, you were never a real Christian. That's probably the most common one, is, oh, you didn't actually believe it, because if you did believe it, you wouldn't have fallen away. Or you got the wrong theology. You believe the wrong thing. I get a lot of people trying to give me the right theology. Oh, you need to hear the gospel from a new perspective. Then it'll open your eyes. I'm like, dude, I can give you the gospel 10 different ways from 10 different denominations. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is that there's no truth at the bottom of this. And the next response is, they will tell me that I've been led astray by the devil. I'm suffering from satanic deception. Like, okay, well, you have to prove that there's a devil before you can use the devil as an excuse. So that's a dead end. Another response is, God didn't give you what you wanted and you're mad at God. Like, well, that one like really pisses me off, because like they'll look for plot holes in my story and they'll accuse me of being the problem. Like, well, you demanded too much of God, and God wasn't. You can't put the Lord thy God to the test.
Right.
And you're angry and bitter that you didn't get what you wanted when you wanted it. Like, well, if that was true, would I really take the risk of going to hell because I'm angry at God? Like, if this life is so short and so meaningless and it's all about eternity, then why would I get mad at God and say, well, you didn't give me what I wanted here on earth? I'd rather go to hell for eternity. Like, the risk of ending up in the lake of fire is so high that that argument just does not hold up. Like, if I believed it was the truth, I absolutely would have stayed a Christian, no matter what God had done to me. I was willing to suffer through anything. Let's see. There's 2 more. One is that you had a bad experience in the church, and the church hurt you. Well, I'm sure that there are quite a few ex-Christians that have had bad experiences in the church, and that's why they're no longer Christians. And clearly, for a lot of them, there's a lot of trauma there. People get abused by pastors and youth leaders, and they have very bad experiences, and they may be absolutely justified in leaving the church for that reason. But that wasn't me. I didn't have a bad experience in the church. It was my community. Um, and the fourth one, because I always have trouble remembering the list, because whenever you have a list, you always lose the last one. Oh
Well, they
yeah,
say
that's it.
there's
You,
2
you
signs
ju-
of old age. One's forgetting stuff, and I can't remember the other one.
exactly. The other side of old age is remembering things that aren't that didn't happen.
Exactly. Thus
um,
Christianity.
yeah, exactly. No, the last one I get is, you just want to sin. I'm sure we've all heard that before. You had a sin problem. You had something that your conscience was bothering you over, and you chose your sin over God so that you could keep sinning and you wouldn't have to feel guilty about it. Well, does that, if you really believe that God is real and the Bible is true, are you really going to not feel guilty about your sin if you leave Christianity or you leave the church? Like, and again, are we trading sin for the lake of fire? Like, what good would it be for me to have some fun for a while sitting on earth if I know that it's going to result in eternity in the lake of fire? Like, no one is going to make that trade. Nobody's going to make a deal with the devil like that. They're just not. And for what? How bad are our sins? I mean, really, these things that people claim are sins. Like, I got news for you. All Christians are still doing it, even while they're going to church and reading their Bibles and praying and pretending like they're in a relationship with Jesus. They're still engaging in the same exact sins as anybody else would. They're just pretending it's not a sin and making excuses for it, or asking God for forgiveness. So to say I traded the truth for some fleeting temporary sin is ridiculous. You tell me the sin that I'm engaging in and show me how it's better than eternal life in heaven. Like, these 5 responses I get from Christians are just excuses, because they don't want to accept the fact that somebody could genuinely believe the gospel and then later on genuinely not believe it.
Hmm.
It's
It
it's
seems
so
like
frustrating.
a lot of it. You alluded to this in different words, but just the phrase I use a lot is scope for the imagination, from Anne of Green Gables. But just like can you at least imagine that maybe this is a man-made religion? Like, you can imagine that easily for every other religion on the planet. Everything else is a man-made religion. But can you just imagine for 1 second how, if it could have theoretically happened, that this was a man-made religion, how would it have happened? And all of a sudden you're like, you can put the pieces together and see how it could have theoretically happened. Even if you don't think that yet, you can see how it could have been that. But they put their fingers in their ears and act like, there's nothing to say about it. And it's really, I love how you're pointing out this part out in your story, because I think it's amazing to me how there's like 2 or 3 tracks that happen. One of them is like this new information that you read, and the new philosophy you think about, whether it's, comparative mythology, or just thinking about would God send people to hell? Why does God let 2-year-olds die of cancer? Like whatever it is, there's so many issues, the psychopathic nature of Yahweh, whatever it is you're thinking about, like that's your first like track out. But then there's like a second track where you bring these issues in good faith, like you said, to the people who are supposedly your most trusted companions in this journey, Christians, and they act like, number one, there's no issue, and number two, you're crazy. And all of a sudden they don't realize it, but there's this track of you getting out. They're speeding the whole thing up by adding this second track that says we're going to pretend there's no issue when there really, really is. The whole house is burning down, and we're going to act like it's on fire. Or it's like, it's fine, it's not on fire. And you're like, it's clearly on fire, it's burning down. The dominoes are falling, and they're like, no, they're not. And it really brings up too, I think, the issue that when they cannot stand someone that's been an insider getting out. If you're outside of it and you're like, I don't know, I might be a Christian someday, I might believe, but I don't know. Pray for me if you want to. I don't care. But like, yeah, no, we'll pray for you. We'll love bomb the hell out of you. We'll bring you to our potlucks and please come be part of it. They'll do that for 20 years. They'll pray for your soul. But if once you're in it and you're in it, you're doing ministry, and you're totally involved, and you're clearly giving your life to Jesus, at that point when you leave, the only option is to really call you a traitor. And it's staggering to me that so many of them don't want to really admit that once they categorize you as a traitor, the idea of caring about your soul, which you'd think is the first priority on their minds, thinking this person probably is not saved, Tim's probably not saved, you're probably not saved. It's like, if Elliot's not really saved, then what we really need to do right now is not be angry at him. We need to pray for him and love bomb him back, tell him, that we love him to death, and can keep that connection as tight as possible, so that when he's ready, when the Spirit moves and his heart softens again, that finally we can present the gospel in a more beautiful way, and he'll finally accept it and get saved for real the first time. But instead of having that soft response, that empathy, and that desire to connect with you, again, they treat you like a traitor and they shun you. And that's where it's again, like, it's like a third track, and they just keep on adding these ways that you're just like, what the hell? Do you, number one, did you not care about this critical information? Number two, do you not care about my soul? Like, really, you've been telling me for 20 years, 30 years, everything that matters in life is my eternal soul. And now that I'm kind of, in your worldview, exposing that my eternal soul may not be saved, this is when you're going to abandon me and say, screw you, and just go burn in hell. Like, that's what this has been about. And it's kind of like it's kind of similar to me, like a Trump MAGA moment. Like, wait, that's your Christianity allows for Trump to be your hero? So Jesus, you're going to say from the pulpit, this is a good administration that's honoring God, or that God's using it, or we're going to vote for him in the sense of our righteousness leads us to want to vote for Trump. And you're like, wait a second, like, this doesn't make any sense. You're exposing, you're showing your true colors all over the place. And in these situations, they look honestly so foolish, and you can't help but be angry, like you said, but also you feel so bad for them. Like, you guys really are brainwashed, like seriously, aggressively, intensely, overwhelmingly, disturbingly brainwashed. And you're the people that raised me. You're the people that I worked with. You're the people I called my best friends. You brainwashed a lot, and I was one of you. And man, it shakes you up to realize you were in it. And that's why I say to people, I felt like when I left, I kind of felt like I won the lottery. I'm like, I could have been in this nonsense worldview till the day I died. I feel so angry. I feel so like this is nuts, that this is not real. This was my Lord and Savior. This was my Heavenly Father. This was my everything. This was my afterlife. This was my future, my eternity. This was my dream, to see my Savior face to face and be transformed and glorified. and to see the glories of heaven and of the kingdom. I don't get any of that. It's all pretend. Like, are you kidding me? But at the same time, I felt relieved to think I've got a little time left to actually live my real life. And just it, but it blows you away, and it shakes you to your core to think, as much as we would have said all these other religions are brainwashing their people, finally, when it's like the outsider test for faith. Finally, you step out of it and you say, yeah, as much as I would have said Islam's nonsense, Buddhism is nonsense, Hinduism is nonsense. Finally, the tables turn, and you're like, Christianity is just as much nonsense as well. And they couldn't see it, but now you see it, and all of a sudden there's red flags everywhere. Like, what, I was pretending to eat a dead man's body and drink a dead man's blood. Are you kidding me? I worship a God who likes to cut off of little boys' penises. Are you kidding me? What the hell was I in? This was truly a cult. This was a blood magic, human sacrifice, death cult. And you're like, God almighty, this is nuts. I cannot believe that I wasted my life on this nonsense. But once you see it in other people, you're like, wow, it hurts. You guys are stuck and you're probably not going to get out. And that stinks. That really stinks.
Yeah, and you have very limited opportunities to discuss that with them because, like, for me, I lost every Christian friend that I had prior to leaving Christianity. Oh, well, every friend I had prior to leaving Christianity, I lost after I left because they cut you off. They don't want to talk to you anymore. They don't want to hear it. Even if you don't want to talk to them about your experience or Christianity, they will still cut you off because you're an apostate. Like, I had my best friend, who I'd known for like over 10 years. We were roommates for years, and he goes to drug rehab and he has a salvation experience. And he gets out, and I invited him to come visit me, and he did. And when he was here, he told me, you know, according to, I forget the one of Paul's letters, it's like, according to the New Testament, I can't even sit down with you over dinner because you're an apostate. And after he left, after his visit, like, he blocked my number and he stopped talking to me. I didn't stop being friends with him. He stopped being friends with me. That's the experience I had with everyone that I knew. It's such a threat to them. Like, you've left the cult. It's very similar to politics. Like, the last election proved to me that people don't actually believe what they claim they believe. They don't care about the truth. I think there's
Yep.
something else going on here. I think that this is about ritual. It's about community. It's about superstition. Um, it's about 100 different things that aren't actual true belief. Because if it was actual true belief, they would be living like I was living when I was having my faith experience. But none of them are. Like, I like to say, you don't take God to the grocery store with you to buy groceries. You can live your entire life and get through it without God having any impact on it whatsoever. And you do. This is something that is a sideshow in your life. You read the Bible in the morning, you pray, and you go to church, and you tell people you're a Christian, but you're not actually living it, because there is no way to live the Christian life. God has no impact on your day-to-day life. God's not punching the snooze button on my alarm clock and going with me to work. He's just not here. He's not real to me in a way that a real God would be. So I don't think these people believe it on a true belief level. I think that the rational part of their brain prevents them from believing fairy tales on a true belief level. I think this is on a much more, surface level of belief. Because if they actually witnessed something happen in the real world, like God creating something out of thin air, like, they believe God can do that. But if he actually did it in front of them, they'd have a heart attack. If Jesus came down and appeared to them, they would die of fright. Because I don't think that this is something you can believe on a true belief level. This is an abstract concept,
Yeah.
much like,
That's a great point.
politics. Politics is an abstract concept. We play the game. We're part of the tribe. We're part of the community. But our side can do absolutely no wrong, no matter what they do. We're going to support them, and that's That's the same way with Christianity. Like they're going to support this God no matter how many babies he butchers or drowns in the flood or genocides, how many tribes in the desert he genocided, no matter how many billions of people he throws in the eternal lake of fire. Like we don't care. We're going to follow him anyway. Why? Because they don't really believe it. Like if God could suck them out of the world and transport them to the edge of the lake of fire and have them actually see it for themselves as if they were standing on the edge of a volcano and they knew for a fact it was real and they came back from that experience, it would be all they could think about. All they could think about is, I don't want to go there and I don't want anyone else to go there. And their entire life would be organized around not going there. But nobody has stood on the edge of the lake of fire. It's just it only exists up here just as an idea. That's why they can tell people, "Well, you're going to hell, or God's going to judge you." Like there's no like connection with reality in the real world. It's just an abstract concept.
Yeah, agreed 100%. It is crazy. It's very sad. Well, I know we've gone here for a while. I did want to ask just a couple wrap up questions, and we'll go to any final comments that we didn't get to. But want to ask, all this stuff is obviously, it's extremely painful. You're doing an amazing job with getting your thoughts out in your first book, which again, if anybody wants to go check it out, the link's beneath the video. But now your second book, you do amazing work with talking through these issues with Alan Bondar
Thank
on
you.
the
I appreciate that.
Deconversionists. And that link's beneath this video. Please go like and subscribe to their channel. But in the big picture, a lot of times talking through it is one of the best ways to get over the religious trauma. But I just want to, I guess, maybe ask as a big final question, how are you doing with all this at this point? There's, from what you've told me tonight, told our whole group, you've been through a lot between the waterboarding at the earliest days and the verbal abuse, the other physical abuse, to just this whole rigmarole of being sucked in so deeply and then trying to figure out if it's real or not, and then the pain of escaping, which is itself quite a mind job, and then the pain of being shunned. That is a boatload of religious trauma. That is a boatload of just all kinds of trauma, not just religious, like psychological, sociological. I'm sure it's hit your nervous system a million different ways over the years. At this point, it's been a few years. Obviously, how are you doing with it, and kind of what are the things that you find have helped the most in trying to reclaim your life or your identity, and just to feel safe again in your own skin and your own mind? Like what's some of the things that are making a difference for you?
That's a really good question. I'm not really sure I have a very good answer for it, unfortunately. I have hardened myself pretty hard at this point to where this it doesn't affect me anymore. Like I said before, like I went deep down into the abyss um, many times. So this isn't really necessarily related to religion, but I suppose it could be. And I wouldn't recommend anything to anybody is to copy anything that I'm doing or did as far as dealing with it. I think there are the healthy way to deal with it would probably be to go and seek a secular therapy and to talk it through with a professional. I have not done that, and I won't do that. I guess I'm just a different kind of person where my life experiences have made me pretty hard. Um, I would just tell people that all around us in the world is a really nasty place, but we rarely see it. If we just go through our daily lives, we will in a first world country. If you happen to have the misfortune to be somewhere else, you're probably going to see it on a daily basis. But living in a first world country, like we don't get pulled down into the abyss very often, but the abyss still is there under the surface. You could be on your way home from work today and you could be in a terrible car accident and you could be dragged into the abyss immediately into an abyss that you might not be able to get out of. Like it's everywhere around us. Terrible things, whether it's diseases or cancer or violence. All kinds of things have the potential to create extreme trauma in our lives. We cover it up very well as a culture. But there's a lot of doors out there that we only see the outside of them, but on the inside, there's people that are living in the abyss. They're living in they're living through hell. And I've been dragged into the abyss so many times that maybe I've let it corrupt my way of being in the world, or my coping mechanism, where I've desensitized myself to it so much that there's very few things that could really hurt me at this point. I guess it's like a vaccine. You take a vaccine against the real world if you've been through enough shit to where it's not going to penetrate. You expect it. You expect really terrible things to happen, and you expect them to come back around and find you again. We'll all be there. We all will be standing at the brink of death or non-existence, and we'll all have to deal with it, whether it's somebody else's death or whether it's ours, and we have the misfortune of knowing that it's coming for us. But you'll always eventually have to deal with it, with that abyss, and there's really no good way to prepare for it. You just have to do your best.
I agree. I agree. You definitely have to just face it head on. And in some ways, I think we could argue too that you need to develop a thick skin of sorts for these situations, because life is going to just tear you down at times in terms of people disappointing us and the hurts and the wounds of all this. I just want to add, if I can, just my 2 cents. I think for a lot of us, the religious trauma is so painful, especially when you've lost as much as someone like you. You've lost a lot, in my opinion. You've lost a lot, and I would say I'm in that boat too. I've lost an incredible amount because of my deconversion. There's days it almost overwhelms me, the pain of what I've lost. But I just want to sort of say I don't know if it's a word of encouragement, or at least just a thank you, that I think in some ways, one of the beauties of what you're doing, despite the fact that it probably feels like you're a little bit jaded at this point, probably, as am I, but your willingness to go out there and share your story, working with your books and your YouTube channel with Alan Bondar, the Deconversionists, that in many ways you're taking something that is painful, and despite the fact that talking about it may never really fix the wounds in your heart, you are aware, as I am, that your story does impact other people, in the sense that there are people who will say, I don't know how I can get through this. They're arguably in the very darkest part of it, where it's like, I can't go back, but I also know if I go forward, all hell's going to break loose in my life. And they just feel frozen, and they're like a deer in the headlights, thinking, I can't figure out what to do, but this is awful. I don't think it's real. And what's amazing is, as I say, your story, which you share all the time, in your insights on your channel, your story becomes someone else's survival manual, and someone else can look at you and say, because of him, and then maybe they relate to you in a way that's really unique. And it's like, because of your story, and because you survived, maybe, just maybe, I'll get through it too. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, because in many ways, I think, to me, that a lot of the healing from religious trauma is trying to say, from this point on, I can't fix a whole bunch. There's just, my hands feel tied in so many ways, but there's one thing I can do. I can try to leave this planet better than I found it. And to me, leaving it better than I found it means trying to help people escape and trying to help people to heal. And that's what you do on a regular basis. And I appreciate that so much, and Alan as well. But that's some good stuff. And it's like, it doesn't heal the wounds. In some ways, maybe it makes it worse, because we talk, people like you and I talk about our religious experiences so much that it's like we're constantly triggering ourselves, or opening the old wounds, and that's painful too. But at the same time, there's a beauty. Just like in Christianity, you would have done anything to serve other people. I want to wash your feet. I want to be a blessing to you. You outrank me. I will always give up my rights so I can serve you and love on you. And in some ways, that servant's heart still comes through. It's obviously not for the crowns of the kingdom, but it's for the sense of saying, I don't want other people to get stuck in this labyrinth for the mind like I did. And maybe if I'm vocal enough, and maybe if I do enough things different ways, maybe somebody out there will get out earlier. Maybe they'll get out at age 18 or age 21, and they'll be spared some of this nonsense. And to me, that's a very healing thing, to just hope that we're making a difference. And I think we are. I get enough emails to know we are. But to think this is what it's about. It's about taking our experiences And just like in was it Genesis, the end of Genesis, where Joseph was sold into slavery. As for you, you meant it for evil, but God meant it unto good to save all these people through the famine. And it's like, you know what? All this Christianity garbage, in a sense, it feels like it meant so much evil for us. It meant so much bad. It just destroyed us. It stole our identity. It replaced it with so much worm theology and purity culture garbage. And you know what? It was so bad for us. But here we are, where we're standing. We know how the sausage is made, and that makes us dangerous to Christianity. And just, I like to say, half jokingly, but not fully jokingly, if I put 1,000 people out, I know how to take 100,000, or if I put 1,000 into the kingdom, I know how to take 100,000 back out, and I'm going to do it. And that's a beautiful thing, to be able to say, I am sick of mythology making people's minds into this enslaved labyrinth dynamic. I'm tired of it. We are better. We have evolved so much from being primates, but it's like we got frozen once religion came on. It's like we are better than this. We're so much better than the tribalism. We're so much better than the nastiness. We're so much better than the abusiveness. But we have to find a way. It's like we're in the birth pang, so to speak, of the next evolution of human psychology. We have to get past religion. And you're making a difference, and hopefully I am too. But I just want to commend you for that. It makes a difference to me a lot that we can stand up and hopefully leave this planet better than we found it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Before we end, my AirPods are just about played out here, so I want to get this out before they cut out. Sure. Just to riff off that as a closing remark. Atheism leaves no room for excuses. I've got a couple chapters towards the end of my book. One is called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," which is a counter to the we hear that a lot. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The counter to that is I don't have enough courage to be an atheist. It takes a lot of courage to leave behind eternal life and false hope. And I close my book with my opinion on the nature of reality and what we're doing here. And we're in a struggle right now between the fairy tales of the past and the science fiction of the future. We're right in the middle. We are wandering through a no man's land of no hope. We don't know where to go. But dragging those fairy tales with us is going to delay us getting to that better world of the future, that science fiction of the future. By dragging the fantasy fiction of the past with us, we have to let it go, and we have to go through a time as a culture or a society or a civilization. We have to go through that dark time, that no man's land of nihilism and depression. Like, we got to fight through it. We got to push through it. We don't have a choice. Like, if these stories aren't true, we don't have a choice. We have got to leave them behind. And so what we see right now in America with the new atheists being blamed for all the weirdness, I guess, that the Christian right wants to talk about. Like, oh, this is what happens when we kill God. Like, yes, but we're struggling to find our new identity. Like, we have to go through that. To retreat back to the fairy tales is going the wrong direction. Yeah, things are going to be weird. Things are going to feel hopeless. There's going to be a lot of nihilism, but we can't give up. We have to push through it. And you've got to come with us. Like, it's the only way is to go forward. And like, yeah, the pendulum swings. Like, we lose religion, we get into a weird place. Don't let it swing back to religion. Let it go all the way through.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Let me just read a few quick comments here, and then we'll call it a night. Resist depression, bring in the algo love. I appreciate that. Louis Giuliello, I'm not sure what the context was when you wrote that, but I wrote the word fear. Bless your heart says sunk cost fallacy for some of them. Absolutely. Double down for sure. If you can't ask God for what you want, then why pray? If his plan is perfect, why ask him to deviate from it? It's illogical. Yep, for sure. And a couple last ones here. Nicole says, thanks so much for sharing, guys. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Nicole, for being here. Really appreciate it. And Davish Shorb says, thanks for your story. I had enough clarity one day to think, what if it's not true? Yeah. Exactly. That's all it takes is one good question. There's a thousand good questions, but it just takes one good question to spark that. And as we say, very large doors move on very small hinges. You get a good question in the, as a splinter in your mind, and all of a sudden, boom, and one, have you ever seen those dominoes where instead of it being like all the same dominoes, they take like one teeny domino, then the next one is a
Yeah.
little bit bigger, a little bit, one little domino starts the movement, and eventually you're tipping the big dominoes. It's amazing. Well, I just want to say again, thanks to Elliot for coming today. It was so great to see you again. We've been speaking today with Elliott Christopherson, and again, the book, please do check out his book. The links beneath this video. Please check out the Deconversionists. He and Alan are doing great work there. I've been on the channel at least once, if not twice, I believe. And it's such good stuff. And you guys do interviews. You guys do just your own monologues and dialogues. Good stuff. So please support them in any way you can. But Elliot, thank you so much. Great to see you. Thanks for your story. And let's do it again sometime.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate what you do. You have an amazing forum here for people to share their experiences. This is invaluable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being a part of our story, letting us be a part of yours. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.